Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Zunaira and I am going to discuss with you the regulation and disorders of sodium balance. So sodium is the most abundant cation in the body. It has an extracellular fluid concentration of between 135 to 145 milliequivalent per liters, and its intracellular fluid concentration is about 10 to 14 milliequivalent per liter. As obvious from the values, it is mainly an extracellular fluid compartment cation. So the sodium transport occurs through the membrane through sodium potassium ATPase pump. So it means that sodium is impermeable through the cell membrane. Sodium, along with its counterpart anions, that is chloride and bicarb, accounts for about 90 to 95% of the osmotic activity in the extracellular fluid. So what are the different gains and losses of sodium? Sodium enters the body mostly through GIT. We take it orally through our food, but the elimination occurs through kidneys, GIT and skin. The daily sodium requirement is about 500 milligram per day, but an average person takes about 6 to 15 grams per day. So what happens to all this sodium that we take? So kidneys actually account for about 90% of sodium elimination, and the other 10% occurs through GIT and skin. How does GIT regulate sodium? So whenever we eat something, the sodium in it is absorbed throughout the GI tract along with the food. It is absorbed so much so that only 40 milliequivalent per liter is lost through stools. But these GI losses become significant in conditions such as vomiting, diarrhea and fistulas. How does skin regulate the loss of sodium? The loss of sodium occurs through sweat glands through the skin. So what is sweat? Sweat is formed of sodium and chloride. Normally we do not sweat very much, so the loss of sodium is negligible through sweat, but it becomes significant or is greatly increased during exercise and periods of heat exposure. So how does our body regulate sodium? There are different mechanisms for regulation of sodium. First, there is the mechanism of maintenance of effective circulatory volume. What does that mean? It actually means, what is the effective circulatory volume? It is the volume of blood present in our circulatory system. So this effective circulatory volume is maintained through some receptors in the body called the baroreceptors, and this mechanism is actually involved in the regulation of both sodium and water. Then the next mechanism is renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. This we're going to discuss in the further slides, and there are some additional mechanisms as well. So how does effective circulatory volume controls sodium levels? So the effective circulatory system is monitored by baroreceptors. What are baroreceptors? They are receptors which detect different pressure changes in the circulatory system. Where are they located? They are located in different low pressure areas like the walls of cardiac atria and large pulmonary vessels, but they are also located in high pressure areas like aortic arch and carotid sinus. They regulate different levels of fluids and sodium in the body by modulating sympathetic nervous system outflow and ADH secretion. So what does it mean by modulating sympathetic nervous system flow? Whenever there is increased blood pressure in the body, the baroreceptors would detect that increased pressure, and what would they say to the sympathetic nervous system? They would want the sympathetic nervous system to shut down or decrease its sympathetic activity to decrease the blood pressure, and vice versa whenever there is a decrease in blood pressure. Sympathetic activity then regulates the tubular reabsorption of sodium and renin release. And the other mechanism by which these baroreceptors work is by causing ADH secretion or inhibition. So the second mechanism is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. So as you can see in the diagram, the liver produces a protein called angiotensinogen, which is acted upon by a protein through the kidney called renin and converts the angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. Then there is an enzyme called angiotensin converting enzyme, which is produced both by the lungs and the kidneys, and it converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Then angiotensin 2 acts upon the adrenal cortex and causes the release of aldosterone. What are the functions of aldosterone? They cause the absorption of sodium and chloride, and some other functions of aldosterone include potassium excretion and water retention. Another function of angiotensin II is to cause the release of ADH from the posterior pituitary. What would ADH do? It would cause an increased water absorption. Another function of angiotensin II is, as obvious from its name, it is angiotensin. Angio, by angio we means blood vessels, and by tensin we means something that tenses or constricts a thing. So a function of angiotensin II is to cause arteriolar vasoconstriction and thereby causing a increase in blood pressure. Angiotensin II also results in an increased sympathetic activity. So the overall effect of the whole angiotensin aldosterone system would be sodium and water retention, increased circulatory volume, increased renal perfusion. Then the other additional mechanisms which I mentioned before, they include atrial natriuretic peptide (ANP), thirst, and ADH secretion, which control sodium indirectly. So what is atrial natriuretic peptide? As obvious from the name, it is atrial, that is produced by the stretching of the atria. It is natriuretic, that is it causes natriuresis or the removal of sodium through urine, and it is a peptide. The mechanism by which thirst and ADH secretion affect sodium have been discussed with you in the last lecture. Now we move forward to disorders of sodium regulation. There are mainly two disorders, which are hyponatremia and hypernatremia. First we are going to discuss hyponatremia. As I mentioned before, the normal concentration of sodium in the plasma is between 135 to 145 milliequivalent per liter. So whenever the plasma sodium concentration is less than 135 milliequivalent, it is called hyponatremia. So there are major two types of hyponatremia. It may be hypotonic hyponatremia or hypertonic hyponatremia. So what does the term tonicity imply here? You have discussed this tonicity in details in previous lectures, but to review, it simply means that if a fluid has a hyperosmotic pressure or is hyperosmolar, it is called hypertonic fluid, and whenever it is hypoosmolar or contains less osmotically active substances, it is called hypotonic. First, hypotonic hyponatremia, that is the most common type of hyponatremia. Then to illustrate, it is further divided into three types: euvolemic, hypovolemic, and hypervolemic. What does euvolemic mean? It simply means that the volume of this compartment of fluid is normal. In hypovolemic, the fluid compartment has less volume, and in hypervolemic, there is increased volume in the fluid compartment. So when would the conditions of euvolemic hypotonic hyponatremia occur? They would occur with increased loss of sodium or in conditions with decreased loss of water. And then the hypovolemic hyponatremia would occur when there is loss of both sodium and water. So when would the volume decrease? Whenever there is loss of water. In this condition, the water loss is there, so it is hypovolemic. In euvolemic, there is decreased loss of water, that's why it is euvolemic, because the water is not being removed from the body, so the volume remains same, but as there is still a loss of sodium, so it is causing hyponatremia. The third one is hypervolemic hyponatremia. It occurs in conditions where there is already an increased extracellular fluid. So what are those conditions? These are the conditions of fluid overload. Then the other major type is hypertonic hyponatremia. It is less common than the hypotonic type. It is also known as translocational hyponatremia. So when does it occur? It occurs in the states of hyperglycemia. So as you already know, glucose is an osmotically active compound. So whenever glucose is present in the extracellular fluid in larger amounts, in conditions of hyperglycemia, what would it cause in the extracellular fluid? It would make the extracellular fluid hypertonic or hyperosmolar. So whenever the extracellular fluid is hyperosmolar, it drags water from intracellular fluid. So there is an osmotic shift of water from intracellular fluid into the extracellular fluid, or there is a translocation of water from the intracellular fluid to extracellular fluid. So this is a table from your book. It explains different causes and manifestations of hyponatremia. So as I discussed with you earlier, there are the two major types, that are the hypotonic hyponatremia and hypertonic hyponatremia. Hypertonic hyponatremia I just explained to you, and then the most common category like hypotonic hyponatremia is further divided into hypovolemic hyponatremia, then euvolemic hyponatremia, and then hypervolemic hyponatremia. So we are going to discuss only one example from each. So in terms of hypovolemic hyponatremia, let's discuss GI losses. What is happening in GI losses is whenever there is vomiting or diarrhea, the fluid is being removed from body. Not only sodium is being removed, but also water is being removed. Like when you vomit, there's both sodium and water in the vomit, or in case of diarrhea as well. So there is decreased sodium along with decreased extracellular fluid volumes, then hence it's called hypovolemic. Then in case of euvolemic, it occurs in conditions such as SIADH, or a condition in which there is increased ADH level. So what ADH is doing is it's retaining water in the body, but still there is sodium being removed from the body. So there is a hyponatremia, but the water levels are still normal. So it is called euvolemic or normal volume. Then the third one is hypervolemic. These occur in the condition, as I told you before, of fluid overload. So as seen in the example, decompensated heart failure, advanced liver disease, or kidney failure. These are all three conditions in which there is fluid overload in the body. So what is happening? There is decreased serum sodium, but there is increased extracellular fluid in the body. What are going to be different manifestations? The lab values are going to be obvious. The serum sodium levels would be below 135, and in hypotonic ones the serum osmolality would be less than 280, and in the hypertonic one the serum osmolality would be more than 80. And what are the different signs and symptoms? There would be muscle cramps, weakness, headache, depression, a feeling of impending doom, personality changes, lethargy, stupor, coma, and then the GI manifestations like anorexia, nausea, vomiting. And in conditions with increased intercellular fluid, there would be edema. I've explained these clinical manifestations to you in the diagram before, but we're going to repeat it again. What are going to be different clinical manifestations? They are going to be muscle cramps, weakness and fatigue, apathy, lethargy and headache, progressing to disorientation, confusion, gross motor weakness, and depression of deep tendon reflexes. The seizures and coma can occur at extremely low levels of sodium. But if this condition of hyponatremia is developing slowly, the signs and symptoms may not appear until the levels become as low as 120 milliequivalent per liter. How you're going to diagnose? You're going to observe the lab reports, you're going to assess the patient's volume status, you're going to see if there are any predisposing factors like fluid overload or an other disease, and you're going to see the sign and symptoms. Now for the treatment. The treatment mainly relies on finding the underlying cause. In diseases like SIADH, you would limit the water intake and discontinue the drugs which may be causing SIADH. In conditions with sodium deficiency, when there is decreased oral intake, you would prescribe oral saline or IV saline. And in the patients with symptomatic hyponatremia, what I mean by symptomatic hyponatremia is the patients with neurological signs or more severe conditions. These patients would be treated with hypertonic saline and loop diuretics. But you have to be beware of central pontine myelinolysis. What does it mean? Whenever you correct the sodium levels in the body rapidly, it may cause demyelination of the brain cells. and it would cause neurological signs or even death. The other major condition is hypernatremia. So the hypernatremia obviously means a sodium concentration of more than 145, as the normal range is between 135 to 145. So I told you before, sodium is an impermeable solute, so it contributes its tonicity and induces movement of water across cell membrane. Sodium is impermeable, so it cannot move across the membrane, but what it can do is cause the movement of water across the membrane. Whenever there would be hypernatremia means increased sodium levels. There would always be hypertonicity of extracellular fluid. What it means is extracellular fluid would have increased sodium levels, which would exert its osmotic effect and cause hypertonicity. Due to the hypertonicity of extracellular fluid, there would be a shift of water from intracellular fluid to extracellular fluid, causing a cellular dehydration. The water is being removed from the intracellular fluid, so the cells are becoming dehydrated. This is a table explaining different causes and manifestations. So what are the different causes of hypernatremia? Hypernatremia may occur due to excessive water losses. So whenever water is being removed preferentially than sodium. What I mean by that is there is more water being removed from the body than sodium. The examples are watery diarrhea, excessive sweating, increased respiration in tube feedings and in diabetes insipidus. Or the other cause may be decreased water intake. What decreased water intake would do, that it would concentrate the extracellular fluid and there would be a condition of hypernatremia. When would there be decreased water intake? When there is unavailability of water, there is oral trauma, there is impaired thirst sensation, there is withholding of water for therapeutic reasons, or the patient is unconscious. The third cause would be excessive sodium intake. So whenever we are administrating patient with sodium containing parenteral fluids, or whenever there is a patient of near drowning, that is, the patient has drowned but is still alive. The different lab values would be a serum sodium level above 145, increased serum osmolality, increased hematocrit and BUN. Different signs and symptoms would include polydipsia, oliguria or anuria. Then the signs of intracellular dehydration are further the dry skin and mucous membranes, decreased tissue turgor, tongue rough and fissured, decreased salivation and lacrimation. Then the signs due to the movement of water out of brain cells, like I explained before, there would be cellular dehydration. So cellular dehydration is also occurring in the brain. It would cause headache, agitation, restlessness, decreased reflexes, seizures and coma. And the signs due to decreased vascular volume would be tachycardia, weak and thready pulse, decreased blood pressure and vascular collapse. This is again the repetition of the same clinical manifestations as I explained before. How would you diagnose the patient? You would take a detailed history, you would observe the signs and symptoms of dehydration, and then you would perform different lab tests. Then at the last, how we are going to treat hypernatremia? Again, we are going to treat the underlying cause, and as I explained before, there is cellular dehydration, so we are mainly going to do fluid replacement therapy. And again, in the case of hypernatremia as well, you have to perform a slow correction of hypernatremia, otherwise it would cause a swelling of brain. Okay, this was all about the regulation of sodium and it's about its different disorders. Thank you so much.